lot of variables depending on where you're applying and all that stuff. But let's see. So you get the report?
I should do this.
So we'll assume for today that it's for CRA, but really, probably your first position is going to be a coordinator. Okay. So you're going to go with Brenda, and she's going to take you in. I already talked to her.
Okay.
Okay, so we're going to go through this monitoring visit report. And so you get the projected per site, 80, screen 10, enrolled, randomized 4. Okay, good. So you got those info from
the protocol or
the investigator site file?
yes.
This is also called the regulatory binder. Okay, so they use different names. This is why research confuses a lot of people. It's ISF, and if you go on an interview and they ask you like ISF and you don't know because all you know is regulatory binder, you're going to get nervous, but they're the same thing. Okay. Sometimes they're also called, they're usually called the regulatory binder, reg binder, investigator site file, investigator site binder, essential documents, reg docs. So don't be confused by all the acronyms, okay? So here, and like I said earlier, any of these can be used at random to ask you questions in an interview.
Okay.
This is why people who don't do any training, don't have any experience, why they do bad when they go in an interview. Because you can put whatever you want on your resume. But once you go, I can say I'm Michael Jordan. And then they'll ask me to shoot a basketball. And I'm not Michael Jordan. Okay? So anyone can say that they've been a CRA or they have experience, but then if they ask you, well, what's an investigator site file? You won't know, right? Or if you don't have the experience. Okay. So does the investigator continue to fulfill obligations? So that's one real important thing is, what do you know about PI oversight?
Pretty much it's when the investigator is not present at the screenings, doesn't do most of the site selection visits or what is required in the inclusion and exclusion criteria, is like the what's it called? All this studies or interviews that needs to be done.
So what's the most important thing to look for? Because this is about question 1, does the investigator continue to fulfill obligations? So what are you looking for? Let's say you're a CRA, okay? What are you looking for when it comes to PI oversight?
If protocols are being followed.
There you go, yeah. And it's really just patient safety is the reason, right?
Yeah.
And so this is why CROs and sponsors are cracking down on PI oversight. It's not that they want to, it's that the FDA, this is the biggest finding when the FDA goes to audit sites. The most frequent finding is lack of PI oversight. So that means, give me an example of what you think that means. Like, how would you know as a monitor, like just from these files you looked at, if the PI has adequate oversight?
Okay. I would say one is the subject not signing the updated ICF. That's a PI oversight. Yeah.
So updated informed consents. But what more general? So how do you know if a PI actually has adequate oversight? That's one, making sure that the subjects are signing their informed consents, and we're going to go through some of that. But what's another? Like, what's an easier way to tell? Like right away.
If the PI is not present at the visit.
Okay, that's one, right?
Yes.
It's like what happened today with our site selection officer, right?
Yeah.
He wasn't here. Luckily, the sponsor loves him, so that's okay. But usually, that's not okay, right?
Okay. Yeah.
But what's another way from the subject source? What's another way?
From the subject, if they're enrolling subjects that don't meet the inclusion.
Okay. IE criteria.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happens what happens if you're a CRA and you go to a site? I'm just going to start asking you the job interview questions. You're a CRA, you go to the site, and you realize they randomized someone that should not be in the study. What do you do as a CRA?
In that case, I would be writing. I would request to see the PI, and I will be writing a note to the sponsor, letting them know about the oversight, but pretty much it will be something where the study has to be put on hold to make sure the other patients are being, they're meet the inclusion and exclusion.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, who decides if that patient can continue or not?
Isn't that the investigator?
Well, he or she already thinks they qualify.
Oh.
But now you tell them that they actually don't.
Okay, so
And what do you do if they say, well, you're just a CRA, so no, this patient does belong?
IRB?
No.
Oh.
So a medical monitor. Okay.
Oh, okay.
What do you know, what is a medical monitor? Medical...
Monitor?
Yeah. So CRAs, they're also called monitors.
I see.
But what's a medical monitor?
Let's see, someone...
Everyone gets this wrong when they start.
Probably someone who has who has a medical
Yeah.
background.
That's right. Usually they're MD, okay?
Okay.
And the reason is for exact reasons like the one I just brought up. If you're the CRA, you go to the site and you say subject 1 or subject 8 actually doesn't meet the inclusion criteria, but the PI randomized him because the PI thought he was a perfect patient. So now the PI is arguing with you, I don't care what the protocol says, in my opinion, this patient belongs in the study.
Okay.
So, obviously if they start talking about medical stuff, most CRAs, you're not required to have a medical background. So, the medical monitor needs to get involved. And the only way they allow that patient to continue is with what?
The approval of the medical monitor, or?
Right, yeah. And what is that called when they do that?
Or is it rescheduling or something?
What's that?
Rescheduling? Or
No.
Is it if they...
It's a protocol waiver.
Oh, okay.
You guys talked about waivers in the...
Yeah.
I think Shanae talks about it.
Let me ask this real quick before you go too far.
Yeah.
Is a medical monitor part of the staff on the study?
Oh, yeah. Okay, good. So you have... Alright, I'm glad you brought that up because you asked that earlier. Okay, so you have a sponsor.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
They're like the drug company or the medical device company they created this, whatever it is, investigational product, okay? It could be a pill, it could be a device. We're doing a lot of device studies now.
Okay.
See you tomorrow, Monica.
Bye.
We're doing a lot of device studies now, so it could be like a device, it could be a diagnostic.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what a symbol for a diagnostic is. It could be any of that. That's called the investigational product.
Yeah.
Okay, the IP. So that's the sponsor owns this.
Okay.
They're trying to get it approved by the FDA.
Okay.
Okay, so the FDA is the regulatory agency. Now, sponsors can't enroll patients on their own. They need sites to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have one PI at this site, another PI in Houston, another PI in San Bernardino, another PI in Atlanta, another one in Chicago. Okay, the sponsor will decide how many sites they need based on how many patients they think each site can get.
Okay.
And then they'll make their enrollment projection. So before they even do the study, the sponsor, like let's say they're doing a phase 1, they consult with the FDA first. Okay. So they'll say, hey, we're planning on designing a phase 1 study for this IP. Okay, what do you recommend we look for? There's previous studies that other companies have done, and that the FDA will talk to them about how to design the study. All right. Same thing they do for a phase 2 and a phase 3. Okay.
Okay.
So phase 1 usually done on healthy volunteers, but not always. Sometimes for psych and oncology, it's on the patient themselves.
Yeah.
Phase 2 is like short-term safety and efficacy, like 8 weeks, usually 8 to 12 weeks. Phase 3 is long-term efficacy and safety, okay? So it could be a couple months up to a couple years.
Okay.
So each one of these studies, they'll submit to the FDA, and then the FDA will let them know if they can continue to phase 2,
Okay.
phase 3, and on and on. So that's how they design their protocols.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And then they'll go out and they'll get sites
Yeah.
to participate, and the sites enroll the patients.
Yeah.
Okay? So the sites have the PI, the study coordinator. That's really the two most important roles.
Yes.
Now, there's this whole company called CRO,
Okay.
which DSCS is one. Okay?
Okay.
And these CROs got really big. So the sponsors are not necessarily good at managing clinical trials.
I see.
They're good at creating the investigational product, but they're not good at clinical research. So this group started around the 70s and the 80s called Contract Research Organizations took over. And basically they manage the trial for the sponsor.
Oh.
Okay? So they have monitors. The CRO hires CRAs.
Okay.
The CRO hires medical monitors.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the CRO also brings in all the other vendors,
Okay.
like EDC,
Oh, I see.
IWRS,
Okay.
ECG vendor,
Okay. Okay. I
Central Lab.
See. Alright. All the
'Cause the
others.
sponsor-
Okay.
Sponsors, that's not what they do.
Okay.
Like, they don't know how to manage all these things.
Alright.
But, so these CROs got really big in the 90s and the early 2000s.
Okay.
Now, it's interestingly enough, after 2016, the GCP was revised. So the FDA issued a revision of good clinical practice in 2016, and it said that the sponsor needs to have more oversight over their study. So just like the PI oversight, the PI is responsible for the conduct of the trial at their site. The PI can hire as many coordinators as they want. There could be a million Monicas here.
Okay.
Okay, but if something goes wrong, the FDA holds only the PI responsible.
Okay.
Same thing with after 2016 GCP.
Mm-hmm.
Sponsors before that, before 2016, sponsors, if the FDA found something, sponsors can say, well, that's the CRO's fault. We give them all the study to manage.
Okay.
After 2016, the FDA says you can't do that anymore.
Okay.
It's no matter, you can hire a CRO or you don't have to, but it's your responsibility, the conduct of the study at your sites.
In that case, in a case where you have a sponsor that's also serving as the CRO, they don't need the middleman, they don't need a
They
CRO.
don't. And
Okay.
interesting, because these CROs get super big, and they still do most of the studies.
Okay.
But the trend now is that more and more sponsors are starting to do these things in-house. So sponsors are starting to hire their own CRAs now. Sponsors are starting to hire their own medical monitors. And sponsors are establishing relationships with these sites. Like the one that came today for us, right?
The money.
I don't think she was part of a CRO, was she?
She said she used to be a nurse.
Yeah, but right now she's just a contractor for the sponsor directly.
Wow.
See? They don't not, that study's not using a CRO.
Or maybe it's the other way around. It's the CROs that are becoming the sponsors.
Yeah, but CROs can never create IP. They don't have scientists to create the...
Okay.
You know, sponsors really, they focus on the science.
Okay. Oh, okay.
You know, one of the projects I'm working on, yeah, that's what they do.
True,
And then,
longer.
most importantly than even creating it, is marketing it once it's approved. So you see all those commercials on TV and you see sales reps everywhere,
Yeah.
right? That's what they do. But now they're going to start doing more research because the FDA forces them to do it.
Okay.
And they realize these CROs, they charge a lot. and they provide value, but they charge way too much. Okay, so usually in a typical study, the sponsor pays the CRO, and then the CRO negotiates individual budgets with each site.
Okay.
So the CRO's goal is to keep as much of that money as
As
possible.
possible.
Sponsor doesn't care about that. They have a budget. There's no need for a middleman. So now that they're starting to get more involved, just like the one today, she said she's a contract CRA directly for the
For
sponsor.
the sponsor.
That's it. So all these big CROs like IQVIA, CDS, they're still around because they're massive and they have so many studies. But they're starting to lose market share to smaller CROs like mine. I'm working with very small sponsors that like these big CROs would never work with. And it's more like a true partnership. Like, yeah, because these smaller biotechs, they really don't know what they're doing. So they don't need a huge CRO. They need like small ones. So you can get hired as a CRA by the sponsor or the CRO. Right? It really depends. But that's an overview of how that works. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
It wasn't clear before? Like...
Well, it wasn't really clear because I'm like...
Yeah.
Yeah, like...
Because they start
I was
like...
thinking, why would the sponsors really need a CR? It's like
They
adding
don't.
more...
They really don't, but here's the thing. These sponsors have so much money. Before that 2016 GCP revision where the FDA said, you're responsible. The sponsors didn't care, and they're like, "Look, you do it, you deal with it. If something goes wrong, we're gonna blame you." They were happy with that, because again, they don't want to do their studies. They lose money in the studies. They make the drug and then they sell it. That's what a drug company does. Same with a diagnostic. Same with a device. The same thing. They don't want to do the studies. They have to.
Yeah.
And then they don't want to manage the studies, but now they have to.
They have to.
Which is why now sponsors are required to look at these reports from the CRAs. Which is why, even if you are a CRO, you're very picky about the CRAs you hire. Because the sponsor looks at every CRA CV they're supposed to. And they do background checks now too, on all of them. IQVIA had... a couple years ago, right when this GCP thing was going on, they did a background check of all their CRAs, and they found like 5% of them that completely fabricated their CV, and they were already good monitors, and they all got fired, all of them. Now, they went on to find other jobs because they already had experience.
They already got that experience.
But they'll never work for IQVIA again, right? So that's in a nutshell how that works. Let's see. Another thing that PI oversight, okay? So this is very important. And most of the interview questions, whether you're going to be a coordinator or not, or a CRA, they're going to talk about PI oversight. So PI oversight, there's another way to check through the source if there's adequate PI oversight. What are some of those ways?
To check through the source?
Yeah. What are some of the ways that you can tell the PI is having oversight?
If there are multiple entries?
No. Well, so it's really two things. Like you said one already, informed consent, inclusion, exclusion.
Yeah.
But there's two other, there's labs, okay?
Okay.
And the ECG result.
Okay.
These things require MD to sign off on, and it's the PI. It can't be the coordinator. Even if the coordinator is a foreign doctor and in their country they're a doctor, they can't check off on labs. Has to be the PI. Alright? So you'll see on every lab that's out of range,
Yes.
or every ECG, you'll see either CS or NCS. Do you know what those mean? CS, NCS. They're acronyms.
I know what it means.
You do?
Yeah, I do. I mean, like it checked out and then doesn't check out, but I don't know what. Clinical. Oh, significant and then not clinically significant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know it's one or the other.
You're sick, so it's okay. You took meds. When I take meds, I'm like on another planet. That's what that means. Okay, so on the labs, you'll see like every out of range value will require an initial of the PI, okay, and then CS or NCS and a date.
Okay.
Same thing with the ECG. When you do an ECG, it prints out here. Sometimes it will say normal, but the PI still has to sign off on it.
Yeah.
But sometimes it will say abnormal.
Okay.
And the PI has to put CS or NCS.
Yes. Okay.
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 So that's important. Okay, that's PI oversight. But you're right, informed consent is what they're supposed to do. Inclusion, exclusion is what they're supposed to do. Can a coordinator conduct an informed consent?
Can a coordinator conduct? I would say no.
It's an interview question, but they won't ask it that way.
No. Like explain the informed consent?
Yeah, can a coordinator conduct the informed consent on the patient?
No, because the coordinator might not be able to answer all the medical questions.
That is a good response, but the coordinators are allowed to. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it all depends on the site SOP. Okay. Do you know what a SOP is?
Site operational procedures.
Yeah. Standard operating procedures. Same thing. Okay. So in the SOP, and you were in a SSV today, site selection visit.
Yes.
Did she ask Monica, what is your process of consent?
Yes.
You
she
see?
asked. And that was why I was gonna say yes to that question, because she said she has done a couple of informed. And I was thinking, do you have to be qualified?
You're allowed to. It's all up to the PI.
Okay.
Why? Because if anything goes wrong, the FDA is blaming the PI, not Monica. Okay? So it's up to the PI.
Okay.
Now, this is why the monitor asks for your informed consent SOP at a site selection facility. Okay. This is very important, the process of consent. In some site SOPs, in most site SOPs, the coordinator is allowed to do the informed consent.
Okay.
Okay, but the site has to follow the consent. So sometimes the PI has to co-sign it.
Okay.
Or sometimes the PI has to come in and do like 5 minutes to answer questions.
Okay.
Whatever the site SOP is, it could be, there's no rules really.
Okay.
You just have to follow your own SOP and you have to follow good clinical practice.
Okay.
So you can't be coercive to the subjects. You have to give them time to ask questions. It has to be in a private room. You can't do group consents. Like you can't fill up the waiting room and have everyone do it at once.
Yeah, lunch and learn.
It's not a lunch and learn. And yep. So every informed consent, on average, like how many pages are these things? Have you seen it?
Oh, I think we're up to 39 pages.
How many?
39.
39 for informed consent? That's a lot.
So the average already.
It's like 12 to 16 pages.
Okay.
Alright? They could be longer, but I haven't seen 39. That's a protocol. So an informed consent, they have, page, and then they have a place to initial on the bottom of every page.
Yeah.
Or they don't. Sometimes they don't. And that depends on the IRB. Alright? Now, what do you know about the IRB? Because we forgot to bring them up in the overview of the whole...
The Investigator Review Board?
Yeah,
Whatever
Institutional Review Board.
Whatever rules they set forth for the study has to be what's being followed.
Yeah, so the IRB, I should have put them up when I was describing everyone.
Okay.
All they care about is patient safety and ethics. That's
Yes.
it. They don't care if the drug works or it doesn't work. They do care if it's safe enough to use
Yes.
on humans,
Okay.
right? And they do all these things like risk reward.
Yeah.
Like if there's a risky investigation of product, are the benefits enough to outweigh the risk? They make these decisions. So they have to approve protocol.
Okay.
Sponsor can't just talk to the FDA and then they say, yeah, that's okay. You still need an IRB to approve it.
Okay.
And they're only looking for ethics. The FDA is looking for data, how it's structured, what the endpoints are, right? The IRB is looking for ethics. Like, that's all they care about.
I know the IRB is made up of people who have no interest or whatsoever. Like they just.
They're required to have people from the public at large that have no research
Just
background.
people from public. Just.
Usually it's like pastors or
Okay.
teachers,
Okay.
but there are people on the IRB board that do have research experience, and they require doctors as well. It's a balance.
Yeah, like one of.
Because you can't just get 12 random people off the street and then how would they know if a drug is risky or not?
Yeah.
So you need the balance. But you can't just have pharma people in it either.
Yeah.
Because then the pharma people are just going to approve anything,
Yeah.
right? So you need like a balance.
Okay.
It's like a jury. Like when you select a jury, they don't just pick 12 of the same people. They pick a diverse group, right?
Yeah.
The same thing with the IRB. So one of the interview questions they can trick you on is you go to a site and you notice that only the coordinator is conducting the informed consent. What do?
I ask for the side
SOP,
yeah, the SOP.
standard operating procedure.
And operating procedure.
And you see if on there, if the SOP says the PI needs to co-sign and they're not doing it, that's a problem. Because that means the site's not following their own SOP.
So if the SOP says that the PI needs to co-sign on things, it needs to be at the what's it called, the SSV.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, not the SSV, the consent. So screening visit for the patient.
Yeah.
That's when they sign the consent.
Yes.
right?
Yes. At the beginning of the
Yeah.
screening visit.
Screening visit.
But I'm also saying that usually if it's not at the SSV, then that's an oversight. So that's different from whatever is written in the SOP.
Well, the SOP is only referring to the actual consent.
Of the okay.
It's not about the site selection visit. Because you're not doing anything at the site selection visit except telling the CRA what your process is.
Okay.
Right? But if you're monitoring at a regular visit, not a site selection visit,
Yes.
and you're noticing that only the coordinator is signing the consent form, and you're curious as to why, the answer is you check the site's SOP.
Okay.
If it doesn't mention the PI needs to sign it,
Okay.
then you just make sure it's consistent with GCP.
Yes.
Right? Now it's always best because of the PI oversight thing to have the PI countersign
Yeah.
that's called PI fingerprint. Alright? It's very important that the PI shows their fingerprint on the study.
Okay.
That means ICFs, that means labs, that means ECGs, that means what else did I say? Inclusion, exclusion. That means SAEs that we haven't talked about yet. AEs.
Okay.
Okay. PI fingerprint.
Yeah. Okay.
But GCP doesn't really mandate PI to conduct the informed consent.
Okay.
Now it's recommended because the patient, if they have, like you said, if they have medical questions, they need to get an MD to answer.
Mhm.
Right? So then they should have time for the PI. But if the patient doesn't have questions, it's okay, as long as it's in their SOP.
Okay.
Right? Now if they're not following their SOP, it's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a finding.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what you're concerned with. Same thing with initialing the pages, right? some studies, some IRBs don't require an initial on the bottom of every page, so there won't be any place for an initial. But if the site's SOP says patient must initial and date every page,
Okay.
then whether there's a spot for that or not, the patient should do it.
Alright.
Okay?
Okay.
So if the IRB mandates it, regardless of what the SOP says, that needs to be done.
Okay.
But if the IRB doesn't mandate it, but the site SOP does, then it still needs to be done.
Okay.
I'm a monitor right now. I have 2 sites.
Mhm.
One initials and dates every page, and one doesn't. And the IRB doesn't require it.
Also
And they're
the
both
SOP
okay.
doesn't.
They're both okay because the one that does initial every page, their SOP mandates it,
Okay.
and the one that doesn't, it's not in their SOP.
Okay.
So they're both right. But you won't know unless you look at the process.
Okay.
That's important, alright?
Okay.
So, what do you know about SAEs? What's the difference between an AE and an SAE?
So for SAEs will be things that like any adverse event that leads to death, pregnancy. Well, if any of the subject has, dies pregnant or hospitalized, that will be a serious adverse event. But not AE would just be any medical condition that happens while the subject is on the study drug.
Okay.
It might or might not be related to the study drug.
So, causality of a study drug
Okay.
is different than a SAE. So you're right, an SAE is any untoward medical event that is not life-threatening, or that is life-threatening
Yeah.
and requires hospitalization,
Okay.
okay? And AE is just any unwanted side effect.
Okay.
So this one's serious because it's causing an immediate risk to the patient's
Yeah.
safety, and AE is not, but it's still an adverse event,
Yes.
like a headache, right? If I have a headache and I'm in a study, it's a AE. Now, if I have a headache in the study and it causes serious migraine and I fainted and I go to the ER,
That is a serious.
it's a SAE, whether it's related to the study drug or not.
Yes.
And who's the only one that can determine causality?
The PI.
That's right. That's right. The PI. So, and then there's SUSARs. Okay. Well, do you know what's a SUSAR? It's related to this.
Unexpected serious adverse reaction.
Ah, good. Where did you learn that one from?
You did a videos, right? And we do have models.
Was you learn this in the academy?
Yeah.
Okay. So serious. That's a good answer. I haven't looked at the modules since I did them, since me and Chris did them.
Wow.
A long time ago. So we covered this in there, right?
Yeah, everything is covered in there.
Okay. You're exactly right. Most students don't get that one. So do you know how this relates to SAEs? Because it relates to SAEs.
Okay, so it's in the event when something happens, like an adverse event that happens, but it's most likely due to the study drug, but you're not sure if it's. You're not able to determine if.
Yes. Good. So that's correct. So it's suspected
Yeah.
to be possibly related to the study drug. Okay. So on these SAE forms, okay, let's say I'm in a study and I faint and then the ambulance takes me in the ER.
Yeah.
Okay. So now that's SAE.
Yeah.
Okay. So what do we do, what does the site do the minute, or not the minute, but the day that I go into the ER? What does the site do? There's a form the site has to fill out and send to the sponsor.
Can you report it
Yeah, it goes to the sponsor
within 24 hours?
and the IRB. But what is this form called?
Oh.
It's very simple. These letters are in
forms?
it. Yeah. SAE report.
Okay.
Okay. Or it could be SAE report form.
Okay.
Whatever. As long as you say SAE form, everyone knows what that means. There's an initial SAE report
Okay.
form, and then there's a follow-up SAE report form. This is when I get out of the hospital. Okay?
Mhm.
I'm stable enough to get out.
Mhm.
Maybe the next day, maybe the same day, I get out.
Mhm.
Okay? So that's when the SAE started, and that's when it ended.
Amended.
Okay?
Mhm.
So within 24 hours of the event, this form needs to go to the sponsor and to the IRB. And then within 24 hours of the resolution, same thing.
Okay.
Needs to go to the sponsor and needs to go to the IRB. Now what goes on that form?
The adverse event. What happened?
Yes.
And
So the event, the
yeah.
event itself. Okay. Usually a little narrative about what happened, like context. Okay. Now these things: causality, severity, and resolution. So causality. Only the PI can answer this.
Okay.
Is it related to the study drug or not? In the investigator's opinion, is it related to the study drug or not? Only the PI can check yes, no, or maybe.
Okay.
Severity, only the PI can do it, okay? Usually they have like a scale.
Okay.
How severe was my fainting?
Okay.
Or my blackout? Whatever they call it, they have to call it something. So if I fainted, they got to get the report from the ER as to what they diagnosed me with. Right? Could be that I fainted because of vasovagal nerve.
Okay.
I could have fainted because I had a bad migraine.
Okay.
Could have fainted because I had a stroke.
Okay.
Right? So you need the hospital records for that. Severity, how bad was it? And then resolution, right? So if the PI says yes or maybe for the causality, is it likely related to study drug? By the way, they don't necessarily have to break the blind here, although they probably would.
Okay.
So what do you know about breaking the blind?
I'm not sure.
Let's say I'm in the study and I don't know, I'm double blind, so I don't know if I'm taking the drug or not, but I faint. And the PI doesn't know what I'm taking either.
I have to find out if you're taking the placebo or the study drug.
Right, so that's breaking the blind. Only the PI can do that.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay, so if they find out that I was on study drug, okay, then and the PI thinks it's related, then the sponsor is going to generate a SUSAR report.
Okay.
And they're going to send this report to all the sites participating in not only this study,
Okay.
but all the sites that are participating in a study with this IP.
Okay.
Okay, those are called SUSARs. And the monitor, each site that gets it needs to file those in the rec binder. And the PI has to sign it. Okay. So what a SUSAR is the initial and follow-up reports combined
Yeah.
with some sponsor comments on it as well.
Okay.
Now what's the rationale? Why would every site need to know this?
In case another subject develops that, then they
That's
can
right.
tell.
That's right. Because if it's on a SUSAR that somebody fainted,
Mhm.
and I'm a patient and I'm already susceptible to fainting, I have a history of fainting even before I joined the study,
Mhm.
then they're going to keep a closer eye on me.
Mm.
They'll know that, hey, you need to watch out for this guy.
Yeah.
He has a history of fainting and this subject from this site fainted.
Okay.
Or it could be anything, right? So that's why they do that. So that's SUSAR, SAE, AEs, delegation log. Well, let's do delegation log.
Okay.
What do you know about delegation log?
The PI delegates duties to the appropriate person as long as they have the they're able to carry out the duties. They have the credentials to perform.
So anyone that has their hands on the study at the site
Yes.
should be on this log, okay?
Okay.
Now, as soon as they go on that log,
Yes.
obviously it's the PI, maybe a coordinator, maybe 2 sub-Is. You can have as many people as you want. It's up to the PI, okay? Maybe a medical assistant, maybe a regulatory person,
Yes.
maybe a IP person, like a pharmacist or a blinded or an unblinded IP person, if a protocol needs it, maybe a rater, okay?
Yeah.
So, as soon as somebody, and new staff members, let's say a new coordinator comes on, what do these people, they'll have like their initials
Yeah.
and their signature. Now, why do they do that? Why do they make everyone put their initials and signatures next to their name?
To know what their duties are.
Right, but you could know what their duties are without their signature, just their name. Why do they have the signature and the initials for every person?
Make sure they're coming in, doing what they're supposed to do.
Well, it's to make sure that they acknowledge that they know they're on the log,
Yeah.
but also, what do you do if on a source document,
Yeah.
okay, somebody just signs like that, and they don't put a name?
You can
How do you know who this is?
You can cross-check and make
You
sure.
will look to see whose signature looks like that.
What happens if the signatures still don't look alike?
Then you get a problem,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because some people are messy.
Yeah.
Like mine is just like that. But mine, you can tell. But some people's are like very
Yeah.
simple.
Okay.
It helps with that. It helps with fraud too.
Okay.
Like auditors use it. So, and then they have all the numbers. They have numbers assigned to different assessments on the delegation log.
Yeah.
And so next to each person's name will be like the assessments they're doing.
Okay.
And the site can add more assessments manually too. And they can create the key also. But so everyone that's on that delegation log,
Yeah.
they need, the site needs to maintain a couple documents in the reg binder. They're called essential documents. What's an essential document? What are some essential documents? Regulatory. You have many of these.
It'll be the check-in log, I guess.
What's that? Check-in log.
Yeah, my mind is.
No, that's a monitor. When the monitor comes, they have to sign.
Okay.
That's a monitor visit log. Yeah, that's not an essential document.
Okay, essential documents would be like the.
Every staff on the delegation log needs certain
Their
documents.
CVs.
There you go. CV.
Their
What else? There's, let's see.
certifications and
Mm-hmm.
sorry, I'm just.
CV.
My brain just shut down.
That's alright. You're
Their
sick.
CVs and.
GCP.
Yes, those.
What else do you have?
NIH and
Okay, like
IATA.
IATA training.
Yes.
Okay. Financial
The
disclosure
1572.
form.
Yes.
Financial disclosure.
Yes, that's it.
1572 is an essential document.
Investigator.
Now, the 1572, okay, most important regulatory form in
Yes.
research. It's the PI's promise, signed contract with the FDA.
Yes.
Now, not everyone on the delegation log needs to go on the 1572.
Okay.
Only sub-investigators. So if you have like a medical assistant here, and like a phlebotomist, and a recruiter,
Yes.
and a regulatory person, they don't necessarily have to go on the 1572.
Okay.
Usually nowadays, coordinators have to go on there. In box 6,
Okay.
it's sub-investigators. Okay, but you don't need to put all these people on the delegation log on it. Some sites have like 50 people on a delegation log. Like universities and hospitals, they have like 50 people on the delegation or more.
Wow, that's a lot.
So, okay, so now, a license too, right, for the doctors? Medical license, okay. So, and then you mentioned the protocol.
Yes.
So protocol signature page, right? So there's one more thing. So not everyone on the delegation log has to go on the 1572. Okay, not everyone.
Yeah, not everyone.
Not everyone goes, just sub-Is.
Okay.
But everybody on the delegation log has to do what? Every time there's a new protocol,
Has to
an
train.
amendment, training log. Training log. Training log.
Quick question.
Yeah.
The FDF is only for if anyone has a vested interest in the study, right?
FDF is for anyone in box 6 of the 1572.
Okay, box 6.
And the PI, of course.
Okay.
Okay, box 6. Now sometimes sponsors want like everybody on there, but usually it's just the sub-Is.
Okay.
So training log, what do you know about this thing? This little piece of paper that's so important.
Okay. Make sure that everyone on the study has adequate training to perform the duties that's been delegated to them.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
and they have the good clinical practice training.
Yeah. Sure. But now this is protocol specific training. Okay.
Okay, protocol.
Now every study, the average protocol is amended 4 times during a study. So that means 4 different opportunities to do trainings. Not opportunity, requirements
Okay.
to retrain everybody on this delegation log.
Okay.
Okay?
Wow.
So that's how you track all those things.
That's good.
So anytime there's an amendment,
Yes.
all the staff from the delegation log have to be retrained on the new version of the protocol.
Okay.
And these could be pages upon pages, depending on how many people there are, how many amendments there are, how many times someone was retrained. Let's say you're a coordinator and I'm a PI, and I've trained you on the, by the way, anyone can train the staff, but it should be either the PI or the site director or the lead coordinator that conducts the training. But it could also be the CRA.
Okay.
At the SIV, CRA conducts the training with all the staff that are there,
Okay.
and they document it on this log.
Okay.
Now let's say I'm your PI, and the protocol is amended, so we're on amendment 1 now, okay? So I train you, I say, Lola, we're gonna do a 20-minute training on this new protocol. We do it, we sign it, okay, date it, you're done, right? Now the next week, you make a mistake on the source, and then you do it again. I can retrain you. I should retrain you, alright? So you can have the same person do multiple retrainings of the same amendment.
And every retraining, even if it's the
Should be
same
documented.
amendment, it needs to be.
Yeah,
Okay.
you can never train, you can never over-document training.
Okay.
Most sites under-document training.
Okay.
You don't know how many sites I go to that say that they've retrained a staff member and then it's not on the log. And guess what? The FDA doesn't care what you say. They don't care.
Yeah.
It has to be documented. If it's not written down, never happened, right?
Yeah.
That's very true in research.
True.
So now when a protocol's amended, usually has an informed consent amendment also. So what happens when an informed consent is amended?
Needs to be signed again, explained again to the subject, and have them sign it again.
Yes. And when do they need to re-sign it?
Once it's amended, I guess.
Okay, so let's say it's amended. Let's say I'm a new site and I received the new amendment today for the informed consent. Now I have 10 subjects.
Yes.
When do they need to re-sign it?
When they come back for the next visit?
There you go. Okay. So their next visit. So it's not immediate that they come in.
Yeah.
Okay, at their next visit, they need to sign it. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what if they don't? Which is one of the things you noticed today, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you were monitoring.
That'll be a protocol violation.
Yes, very bad. Okay, it's a protocol and it's IRB reportable because it affects patient safety.
Okay.
So deviations.
Protocol.
So if you were the CRA,
Yes.
what would you do if you noticed that the informed consent was amended and none of the patients re-signed and they all had multiple visits?
None of the patients? Wow.
None of them signed it. And the
Well,
PI says, well, I didn't know I had to.
I'm gonna have to put that to the sponsor.
Yeah, but you
Yeah.
can do something right away at the site. We just talked about it.
Training.
Yep.
Okay.
Not
Will
only
that be
that,
the CRA doing the training?
if you have time,
Okay.
you can also leave it as an action item to your PI to retrain all the staff.
Okay, okay.
But if you have time and if your team lead suggests you should do it, then you can do it.
Okay.
Yeah, you should ask your team lead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think Chris mentioned something about that. Always, try to ask your.
Every CRO is different, every sponsor is different. Some sponsors will tell you to do it if you feel it's necessary. Others will say, you ask us first.
Okay.
Okay. Not only a training log, but what else are you going to check? Their SOP.
Yes.
Why? Why are you going to check their SOP? Because maybe their SOP doesn't mention informed consent amendments. But that's still a violation of GCP. So then the site needs to update their SOP. And they don't even know. You have to check. But what if their SOP does say, when informed consent is amended, you have to do it, and they're not following it, now you gotta have them, and this you can do as an action item, because you can't train a site on their own SOPs.
Yeah.
You can train them on protocol and on GCP, but not on their own SOPs, so this could be an action item for the site to retrain all their staff who conduct informed consents on their SOP.
Okay.
And have another training log for SOP training.
Okay.
It's all, everything is about logs
Okay.
and documents, so you can't have enough of that.
Okay.
Okay? So that's regulatory in a nutshell.
Alright.
So now any of these could be questions, like job interview questions too. Like everything I just mentioned,
Yes.
they can paint, you know the star scenario, the star?
Yes.
Anything we just talked about in this hour, however long we've been doing it, it could be a interview question.
Okay.
Where they're just going to say, what do? You go to the site, just like I did with the informed consent, right? And you see how much of an answer you can give. But if you have no experience, but you claim you do,
Yeah.
you're not going to know any of that.
Yeah.
And then they're going to say, yeah, you're wasting my time.
Makes sense.
They don't even know what a training log is.
Yeah.
How are they going to talk about all that? So it's very hard to fake it as a CRA. I mean, I know people that have. I don't know how.
I'm not very good at that.
Yeah, I don't think I could either. Okay, so you know STAR. Investigational product, you know about that? So, temperature excursion, right? Temperature excursion. So every IP,
Yes.
just drugs, not necessarily devices, but sometimes devices. But definitely all the pills and the injections, they have a range, a temperature range, okay? And the site is supposed to maintain that log. Now what do you do if there is a temperature excursion, but the site was not even aware that there was an excursion and they gave patients excursion IP? And you discovered it because you're a good CRA. And by the way, if you miss it, it's all good until an audit happens. And then they're like, why did Lola miss this? She needs to go.
Okay.
Happens all the time.
So for that, I would have to set the past temperature logs to find out when that started.
Yeah.
And
So you're gonna quarantine.
yes.
So the first thing you should do is find out when it occurred.
Mhm.
How much was it out of range?
Yeah.
Because the sponsors, they built in a safety cushion.
Okay.
So they say this is the range,
Yeah.
but it really is a little bit bigger.
Okay.
No, but it's still gonna be a deviation.
Yeah.
Okay? But they may not require you to quarantine that drug.
Okay.
That's when you gotta follow up with the medical monitor. This happened to Shanae. She's a CRA. She teaches the class.
Yes.
This happened to her psych. So they had a deviation, and she followed up with the medical monitor, and they said that it doesn't need to be quarantined.
Okay.
Okay, but let's say they say it does have to be quarantined, but patients already took it. What does the site do? The site gave the patient pills.
They'll check when the last pill was administered. Call them in for a unscheduled visit.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah.
And return all the drug immediately. Like call them, tell them to stop taking it,
And bring what's up.
return it.
Okay.
Now let's say the patients don't answer their phones. What does the site do?
Can you go look for them?
Well, Monica went to the post office.
Okay.
Certified mail.
Okay. Okay.
Documented. Okay, everything documented. Copy of the letter, copy of the certificate, 3 documented phone calls.
Okay. Okay, that's good.
It's up to the site if they're going to go to the patient's house. I've gone to patient's house to get drugs back.
Okay.
But most coordinators are probably not going to do that. So that I wouldn't send
if you're taking drugs.
unless you know the patient well.
Yeah, totally.
I wouldn't send it, but as the site owner, I've done it.
Okay.
But I wouldn't send Monica to a stranger's house.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. Recruitment. So what do you do if you go to a site and they're not recruiting as they said they would? Let's say at the site selection visit, just like today, we say we can enroll 10 patients, maybe 2 a month, and then you go and we have 0 for a couple of visits.
I'll give a timeline for when I'm back.
Okay.
See how many patients they can get by the time I'm back. If not,
What's up, man? How's it going?
Good.
Good, just filming without you. I'm gonna wrap up right now.
Alright, cool.
So recruitment.
yeah, can I mean, after I give them a timeline for next visit, can I withdraw?
You gotta give them. You have to try to figure out why they're not recruiting.
Okay.
Okay. So how do you figure out why?
Ask what mode of advertisement they've been using. Or
Yes. So you need to find out why. Do we not have enough patients? Jobs. You want jobs. So the type of jobs you can get
okay.
are, well, see, one of the benefits of being in the CRA Academy, and this is for everyone watching, this is going on YouTube, by the way, but
Okay.
you'll have a link to it, is you kind of get helped with a internship, and guess what? Most internships, if they like you, lead to you getting hired. So intern, okay, first. But the way I would go to Indeed.com
Yeah.
and just search clinical research. Have you done this?
I did that, and then
What
Chris
did you
also
see?
mentioned to try coordinator. That's
Yeah.
a good, yeah.
You just want to search clinical research, clinical trials.
Okay. I was actually, when I searched, I was sticking with the ones in Texas. well, around
Yeah.
Houston,
Yeah.
just because I felt a lot of people wouldn't want to move you out there.
No.
But clinical research, yeah, I later on realized there's a job where people travel a lot.
Have you applied to any yet?
Yes,
You
I
have?
applied to a bunch, yeah.
Have you got interviews?
No, I haven't. Like, a lot of them I don't get any reply. Some of them
Yeah.
just like, well, we decided to go with the best fit and, you know, those things they say.
Was this after Julie did your CV?
I'm sorry?
Was this after Julie did your CV?
Yes.
Okay.
And a lot of them are like those jobs at the really huge, like the Mayo Clinic, the MD Anderson, those positions open at those really big hospitals.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like they just usually put the job out there and they just go with people they know, they just move people up, things like that.
Yeah.
And I keep applying to them.
It is about who you know.
Yeah.
That's why I think intern,
Yeah.
you know, another way to intern, so people who do the CRA Academy are lucky because you don't need to ask, you don't need to beg to do an intern, you're given one.
Yeah.
But if you don't do the academy, like if you're just a normal person out there,
Yeah.
then if you go ask the intern, I mean, you might get lucky, but most of the places are not going to want to take the time to train somebody.
Yeah.
So the best way to do it, I was just telling someone today on Instagram, is to be a patient recruiter.
Okay.
All right, and when you start with Brenda, you can tell her you're good at patient recruitment too.
Okay.
So why? Because if you're a patient recruiter, sites, they all have problems with patients.
Okay.
So if you're a patient recruiter and you approach the site and say, hey, I want to work with you as a patient recruiter, you just pay me when I bring a patient that qualifies.
Okay.
You keep doing that a few times.
Okay.
Bring them just 2 patients or 3. You can then start asking them to do internship. And say, hey, I'll continue to recruit, but I want to also learn more about
yeah.
being a coordinator.
Okay.
And you don't need to pay me. I'll just keep recruiting patients.
Okay.
And guess what? If you brought those patients and they're in the study, now those patients know you.
Yeah.
You can help with the retention too.
Yeah, true.
Right?
Yeah.
But you don't need to do that because you're already going to be interning. But that's like the shortcut.
Yeah.
That's like the shortcut that no one does because it's hard.
I picked the CRA Academy because I had the internship. I
Yeah.
saw a lot of them out there and I read up a lot. I knew one thing because I'd been applying to a lot of, you know, clinical jobs and research jobs. And I knew the one thing that was holding back was that internship part, like getting your leg through the door.
Yeah.
So I decided to go with the academy.
Yeah, there's a few other ones. I mean, there's some are probably good. There's some scams too. But there's one that's actually good. It's called Clinical Research Fast Track. But I don't know much about their internship, but I know they have one. But it's not online, it's offline, the class. You have to go to Arizona. But they are like, their instructors have something to do with the SOCRA.
Oh.
So it's okay. It's 1 week, I think.
Yeah. That's true.
It's short, but you know, I think they do internship too. But yeah, you're right, most don't have this option. But Indeed.com, just look for, like, let's say you have some experience now. You know, then you go on Indeed.com and you start searching these 2 terms. And you're going to find all these jobs like Trial Master File. Do you know what a Trial Master File is? Trial
I know.
Master
File.
What's this?
Well, I'm not sure. I don't know what we're talking about.
That's okay. Most people don't know. You've heard of it though, right?
Yes, yes.
So Intralinks is a Trial Master File, actually.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So you have, here's a TMF, okay? Now, let's say this is for one study, okay? Protocol 1. The TMF is maintained by the CRO or the sponsor. There will be folders. Depending how many sites there are, there's that many folders. Site 1, Site 2, Site 3, Site 4. Within those folders, there goes all copies of all the essential documents.
Okay.
Okay, so 1572, FDFs, GCPs, license, IATAs, protocol signature page. Okay.
Any log?
Investigator brochure. Some will do a training log. Like my CRO puts training log in there.
Okay.
I don't know if all of them do, but I think they should. You should put as much, in my opinion, if you're the CRO managing a TMF, you should put as much of these essential documents as you can in there.
Okay.
So basically it's a copy of the entire reg binder in there as it's updated.
Okay.
That's why CRAs are requested when they go on site for a monitoring visit, if there's updated regulatory documents, to collect the copies. And then you'll upload it to the TMF.
Okay.
Or you'll email it to whoever you're supposed to email it to, and they will upload it in the TMF.
Okay.
So you get scans when you're at the site. I use the app on my phone to scan, and then I just email them to my lead, and then I don't know what I think she puts them in the TMF.
Okay.
I'm assuming. And so this is what a TMF is. It's just a copy of every site's reg docs. But it's a lot of work. And it's usually one person managing a TMF. Or two, depending on the sites. But imagine like there's 50 sites in this study, and at every site there's new staff members, there's people leave, so 1572 needs to be changed. Every day something's going on. And then you have to update. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, it is.
But that's what a TMF is. And you know all these documents, so you can do well on these kind of interviews. And you've even used the TMF platform.
Yes.
Intralinks. Now that's just one of many, but it's a big enough name that they'll know that you have experience with it. Because that's why we chose Intralinks for the Academy. It's not that we think it's easy to use. It's actually, I don't think it's easy to use. I think there's much nicer systems, but it's a real one. That's why we use it. But students don't understand until later, but when I tell them. So that's the jobs. What other jobs did you apply for? Mostly coordinator?
Research. Mostly coordinator and research. Frankly, I just want to do a coordinator because...
You like patient interaction?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I do.
Okay. Yeah.
I like to meet people. I want to think I'm a people person. I like to make people comfortable. So
that'd be good. You can maintain the relationships with the PIs, the monitors, and the patients.
Yeah.
It's good. That's like Monica. And Monica's we're grooming her to run the site so that I don't have to do as much on the site. She can manage it.
So you can do PI oversight? I
can go on shows with the GDUP. PI oversight, yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Now, one thing before we wrap up, because this is going to be a long video, like a minute or an hour and 20 minutes. So, oversight for the PI, okay? There's really two definitions for oversight, and don't get them mixed up. When they're talking about PI oversight, it means their overview of, like, they have an eye on everything, okay? Yeah. They're on top of it. Another definition of oversight, which is incorrect for this context, is to overlook something. Okay. That's not what they're referring. We don't want that. Okay. We don't. We want the opposite of that.
Like overseeing everything.
Yes. Okay. Overseeing. Yes. Okay. Not like I made an oversight.
The other definition has been used once in one of our videos.
Oh yeah, that's what makes it confusing.
Yeah.
Because it's the same word, but it actually means the opposite things. It means the opposite things. Yeah. If your PI has that kind of oversight, that's not a good thing.
That's not good.
But they want, in this context of the FDA, they want oversight.
Okay.
So just if in an interview, and when you're interviewing to be a CRA, they're going to ask you more of these kind of things.
Okay.
When they're interviewing you as a coordinator, they're going to ask you more about how do you encourage patients to continue coming to the studies, how do you keep monitors happy. Those are things that you already know, but basically keep queries down, right?
Yeah, and document everything as much as you can.
Yeah, and by the way, these sponsors track everything.
Okay.
Okay, so with EDC,
Mm-hmm.
they have, this is important from the site side, so when you go talk to Brenda, you can impress her, okay? So EDC, okay, that's the electronic data capture, like via Clinica. Monica's going to show you another one tomorrow.
Okay.
I don't know what system she uses. Okay, risk-based monitoring. What do you know about risk-based monitoring?
So it was
RBM,
um,
sorry.
RBM.
RBM, yeah.
With risk-based monitoring, it's wow.
RBM, risk-based monitoring.
Is that the remote one? Is it?
No,
It's the same.
not the same.
Um,
How are they different?
I know what remote monitoring is.
So remote monitoring is simple, right? Don't go on site.
Yeah.
The site uploads into something like Intralinks,
Yes.
and then you look at it.
Compare the.
Yes, that's remote monitoring. Okay.
Risk-based.
Traditional monitoring is when a monitor comes to the site. Okay, so there's remote monitoring. There's on-site monitoring.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the opposites. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then these are opposites. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's risk-based monitoring, and it's opposite with traditional monitoring. Okay, so don't get these two confused. This goes with this,
Oh.
like this goes with this.
So will risk-based monitoring be where patients actually use the system, the calling system,
No.
or use like
So traditional monitoring can use either element. Okay, they can either do remote or on-site or a combination.
Okay.
Okay, but what they're looking at is 100% source data verification.
Yes.
That means every single data point in the EDC is monitored.
Yeah.
It has to be source data verified.
Okay.
Risk-based monitoring is something new that they're not using. It's still like a minority of the times, but it's going to be increasing as technology gets better.
Okay.
Each site is monitored differently based on their risk profile. So you may have this site, okay, and this site might be a high enroller, okay?
Okay.
This site might be a new site, research naive. This site might be traditionally a problem site, and this might be a combination of all.
Okay.
Okay, so each of these sites are going to have a different monitoring strategy. That's called a risk-based monitoring.
Okay.
And it doesn't always require 100% SDV. Like the really good site
Yeah.
won't need 100%. They'll need maybe 20
Lower.
because they're, like let's say you have here a really good site. Okay. Historically, the site doesn't have that many queries, so they know, okay, the monitor only needs to do 20%, 25% SDV, focus on just the important data, and we already know that site doesn't make mistakes. This bad site might need 100%. This one, and then for this site that needs 100%, the monitor might need to go on site more often than at this one.
Okay.
Maybe at this one they just need to go remotely. Right? But so that's the difference between risk-based and traditional. In traditional, all these sites would be treated the same, 100%. The only difference might be some you visit more often than others.
Okay.
But that's the only real strategy they have. With this risk-based monitoring, everything is planned and it could change too. Like if the good site starts getting queries on the 20% SDV more than usual, then you're going to increase it to 30. Or 50 and see what's going on, okay? And the EDC, the queries, how long it takes to enter data. So let's say the patient comes in for a visit today. How quickly does the site enter the data? It's supposed to be within 48 hours, okay? How quickly from when a query is issued do the site answer it? Okay? They track all of this. They track AEs, number of AEs. They track protocol deviations. They track SAEs. Okay? They track even things that would indicate fraud, like favorite numbers. So if a site's just making up patients or making up vital signs,
Yeah.
there's given enough data, they keep using the same numbers.
Okay.
Okay, so they track all of this with technologies now on graphs. So you have, let's say you take queries, okay? How quickly do you answer queries? So this is number of days, okay? And this would be the sites. So let's say this is 1 day and this is 10 days, okay? You have most sites answer queries within 2 to 3 days.
Okay.
You have some sites 10, 9, 8. You have some right away like 1 and 2. Okay. So this is just for queries. Okay.
Okay.
These sites are average. These sites are very good. These sites are awful. Okay. They track all this. Now they track how quickly you enter data. Same thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Then they track AEs.
Okay.
How many AEs is the average site reporting? They'll know based on how many subjects you have, how many the average site is reporting on those subjects. So if you're an outlier,
Yeah.
if all the sites would have an average of 2 AEs per patient, and you have 0 AEs per patient, 0 or 10, okay, this is average. These are under-reporting, and these are over-reporting.
Okay.
They track that. They track deviations. Okay, how many deviations per subject? You're gonna always have average, exceptional, and horrible.
Okay.
Okay? Now if you're a site that constantly gets here on all these things, they're tracking all this. The CRO sponsors are tracking and they're sharing all this information with other sponsors. So they're gonna know, they're gonna give every site like a credit score. Just like we have credit score,
So
right?
sponsors know which ones they don't want to go to, like, right away.
They're starting to do that
That's
now.
good.
With data, with technology, it's
That's
doing
good.
all this.
Makes it easier to be able to keep up with,
Yeah.
those who are actually following protocols and,
But if you're a new site owner
yeah,
and you screw up and you end up here in too many places,
you have to be shut down.
your credit score is going to be like real low compared to the other sites. So when you go get interviewed as a coordinator, you demonstrate that you understand this.
Okay.
You say, I know that with risk-based monitoring, all data is being tracked, and I'm making sure that our site's going to be at least average or exceptional on the important data points, like queries, AEs, protocol deviations, SAEs, fraud.
Okay.
And of course, the biggest graph is recruitment. How many patients you're enrolling in the study. These sites that enroll no patients will never work with that CRO again.
Yeah.
These sites will, as long as this stuff's okay to you. And these sites will get it even if they're bad on these other things.
Okay.
That's how it works. If you understand this, you can interview extremely well as a coordinator anywhere.
Yeah. I
This
never,
is what site owners care about.
Yeah, I never could really grab what risk-based monitoring was about. I think I wrote a paper on one of it. I'll probably have to go check it out.
Yeah, that's one
But
of
I
the
just could
assignments.
not grasp what exactly, like, risk-based monitoring. I'm like, is it about, probably the patient being
Yeah.
able to go home, take their,
It's clearer
stuff,
now.
track it? I'm like,
But now you get it, right?
yeah, I get it. I get it now.
And most studies are still using traditional monitoring. But it's starting to shift to risk-based. Like my CRO, we're actually doing risk-based
Risk-based.
monitoring. But my CRA project that I am a contractor, it's traditional. But they're using a combination of, I go on site every time and I do 100% SDV, but in between my visits, my lead CRA does remote monitoring.
Okay.
But she doesn't really do much, because I do it all there. So she just looks for IP,
Okay.
like did the site receive their next batch of IP. She's not really doing SDV,
Okay.
but she's still monitoring.
Yeah.
That's an easy way to remember. But if you understand, like, just remember the differences, right? Risk-based and traditional, and then remote and on-site. Both can use these things, doesn't matter. Okay, remote, you can be a remote monitor that does traditional monitoring. Okay. Or you could be risk-based that does on-site too. People get that confused. I'll leave that up there because it looks cool.